because the risk is low, and it is difficult to tell the real from the counterfeit or from the illicit, and frankly because sometimes governments have not perceived the true story behind it and thus didn't make it a priority. When you're stacking up national security interests, health pandemics, with what looks like just tobacco smuggling, they don't measure up. But when you peel the layers of the onion, they are in fact part and parcel of the same concerns that every state should have and does have.
Hezbollah basically virtually owns the illicit trade in tobacco products in South America. That's working on Hezbollah issues is one of the ways I sort of cut my teeth in this type of work. The PKK in Turkey, we also have been seeing it that the product has been moving even through areas controlled and on one point in the distribution through the Assad regime, and then later on in the distribution actually controlled by ISIS. So even though they're two different sides of the fence, they're all benefiting. Certainly in the classic scenario that although ISIS advertises that they burn cigarettes because it's contrary to Sharia law, they are taxing the transportation and they are making money along the way. We also know Hamas and FARC. So it's a global problem.
The global contraband market is estimated to be somewhere about 10.7 to 11.6% of the entire global market. In the US, it's thought to be about 10 to 19%. The UK, somewhere between 8 and 18%. Across the EU, about 9%. So you get a sense of sort of the ballpark figures that we're looking at. Well, in Canada, the estimates are somewhere between 15% on the low end and 33% on the high end. And so it suggests that Canada's market does appear to be larger than that of our comparators in terms of jurisdictions. It would also appear that our tax revenue losses are disproportionate. Globally, they're estimated to be about $40 to $50 billion. In Ontario alone, it is estimated that it's somewhere between 700 million, possibly as high as $1 billion. So if you take this as a portion of the entire global tax losses, it suggests that Canada as a whole and Ontario in particular have a disproportionate challenge, but it also suggests that as a result on the in terms of curtailing the market, that there's definite leeway to try to curb the size of that market and at least try to bring it in line with where sort of our other comparator jurisdictions are, that in many cases don't deal with problems that are all that dissimilar from the ones that we are facing in Canada. We do need to, I think, understand that there are public safety and national security implications. And this is perfectly understandable because ultimately you need someone to move that product, especially given the sort of market that we have in Canada and Ontario. And the entities that are best positioned to move that product on a large scale are organized crime syndicates that already have the networks in place. And to them, it doesn't matter whether they're shipping guns, drugs, human beings, cigarettes, whatever it is that gives them bang for their buck in terms of the networks that they have in place. And by virtue of the RCMP seizures, I think we can show that the nature of the problem is different than it has widely been construed. And this has important implications. It has enforcement implications because, for instance, local police forces, even provincial police forces, in many cases do not see it either as their priority or their mandate to enforce acts such as the Excise Act, because it is seen as sort of this is a federal issue. They also feel that in many cases they have bigger fish to fry and more important problems to deal with. But if we can demonstrate that there are concrete linkages involved to public safety, rather than just a problem for the Ministry of Finance's enforcement section, then I think this allows us to get law enforcement on side and will, as a result, I think also spur better cooperation among the agencies at both the same level of government and different levels of government, so both horizontally and vertically.
In the areas of the world that are manufacturing cigarettes and selling them, whether they're selling them under a branded name as a counterfeit cigarette or their own magical invention, what we found is that it's not uncommon to find a manufacturing situation in a hole in the ground where they work at night with lights. There is, rat dung and everything imaginable, because there's no quality control. It's just get those cigarettes out, slap that label on that people think they're buying, and away they go. So you have a lot of aspects that are quite unpleasant, not to mention unhealthy. Once the pipeline is open, and it may start with cigarettes, it can be filled in with any product that needs the same secrecy. And so it's not unusual to see counterfeit pharmaceuticals, weapons, even human smuggling. And then while it's not smuggled, the money component and the funding then becomes an issue.
Acetate tow is one of the key inputs to produce cigarettes. In other words, there are some things that you cannot make cigarettes without. Obviously, the tobacco leaf. The other key input is also cigarette paper, which is a very specific type of paper that has to meet certain standards. And acetate tow is what makes the cigarette filters. So it's a fiber that is produced in big factories where each one is like $500 million. So there's a big infrastructure goes into making it. It's made out of fiber, so it's a cellulose acetate tow. It can also go into air filters and highlighters, magic marker pens. More than 90% goes to cigarettes. Only 6 companies are involved in producing it, so it's a choke point because it's very easy to regulate. We know who the companies are, where they are. Dicel, Rhodia, Eastman, Celanese, and there's another one in China. And so they are in OECD countries that can be, most of them, the biggest producers, and that can be regulated. And we have a framework whereby, the ability of, the guidance for multinational enterprises, which all the countries of the OECD have signed, that multinationals are supposed to abstain from doing harm in their business practices, conflict minerals, due diligence, and there's a growing trend toward understanding that who you sell to and knowing your customer is a key and very effective strategy. And when you only have 6 companies in the entire world providing every cigarette manufacturer, both legal and illegal, it's an obvious way to combat illicit trade while sparing lives and treasure. There is one that's by Gamma, but it's not, as far as we can, Gamma is the Global Acetate Manufacturers Association. It's the industry association that's with all the acetate tow manufacturers, or most of them. And they give sort of good certificates to their companies who say that they enforce a sort of know your customer protocol, but there's no evidence that it's enforced. There is no evidence of the standards that they've, promote certain standards, and we don't know how they're doing the assessment. And obviously it's not working if you have, such a pandemic of illicit trade in tobacco products, none of which could be made if these companies weren't selling their product to make the cigarette filters. Well, you need to understand just how easy a choke point it is, how easy it is to impose, how there is a growing policy trend that's global in order to do this. It creates good branding opportunities for good corporate social responsibility for those who do comply. Even Apple, for instance, is practicing better supply chain management and has used it as an opportunity. De Beers. So this is growing, and to understand the harms that come from not regulating it properly, and basically education of the public and of the policymakers.